Hey, my name is Emma, aka Midsummer Knit Stream, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a basic little podcast episode, catching you guys up on what I've been making and some other fun stuff like what I've been listening to and consuming in terms of media. So without further ado, let's get into the video. I just thought that I would sit down and film a little podcast episode, a little update on what I've been up to, what I've been knitting, how things have been going, and just get up to date in that way. One more thing is that I think I've decided to grow my hair back out. So the entire time I've had this YouTube channel, I've had a sort of medium length haircut. It would be around my collarbone was where I would get it cut, and then it would just sort of grow out over the next few months. So I've always had this sort of length of haircut. But for most of my life I've kept my hair pretty long, and to be honest, what I've realized with this slightly shorter haircut is that I'm just not the best at actually keeping it the correct length. I'm really used to only getting haircuts every 6 months, maybe a little bit more frequently if I have split ends, but maybe just 2 to 3 times a year. And having to go get haircuts every couple of months to sort of keep up with my medium short length haircut just is not working for me. I'm just not very good at making those appointments and staying on top of it. And then my hair keeps growing out to be this awkward length. So I've sort of made the decision, I think, that I'm going to grow it out again, and then I'll probably honestly chop it back to a shorter length at some point in the future. But just want to let you know my hair is going to be a slightly awkward length in the next several videos, I think. But sorry for the random tangent. In other news, I wanted to give an update on all of my projects. So first of all, if my mom is watching this video and she doesn't want to see the sweater that I'm working on for her, she should skip ahead. But I think she's already seen it because I posted about it on Instagram and stuff. But this is a sweater I'm working on for my mom. It is the pattern Ayami by Isabel Kramer. So as you can see, it has this really gorgeous cabled yoke. So it has this sort of herringbone cable style cables up here, and then it sort of decreases into these large normal cables and then goes back to the herringbone style, and then the rest is going to just be stockinette. So I've sort of finished the hardest part of this sweater, which is the yoke, but that's also just the most interesting part of the sweater. So from this point on, I'm basically just doing stockinette and then ribbing when I get to the bottom of the body and the cuffs and the sleeves. But yeah, I think this is looking pretty good so far. I'm really excited about it. I've sort of put all of my other projects on hold to work on this one because I want to have it done by Christmas, ideally. If not by Christmas, then I also am going to be at my parents' home until at least the end of December, if not a little bit longer. So I think it'll be okay if I sort of miss the deadline and am a little bit late on getting this done, but I would like to be done by Christmas so I can give it to my mom. That would be pretty exciting. It really takes me back to when I was younger, and as some of you guys know, I knit a lot growing up, and I was very, very into gift knitting. So every year for Christmas, I would basically start knitting gifts for Christmas right after Christmas passed. I was super on top of it, and I'd like to knit gifts for pretty much everyone. All of my friends, all of my family, I made so many gifts. That was my main thing that I was knitting. And it really takes me back to then, just being on a deadline and trying to get this done by Christmas. It's a little bit stressful, but also really exciting, and it feels really good to be knitting something to give someone else. I do want to say there have been some struggles with this one. To start out with, I didn't actually start out making this pattern Ayami. I started with another pattern called Oxa by Caitlin Hunter. Put a picture of it on the screen somewhere. And that pattern is also really gorgeous. It has also a very cool yoke. The thing that I didn't necessarily realize or think about when I started the pattern is that the pattern and the yoke is created by slipping stitches and therefore making these strands of yarn that go across the knitting. And the reason that it looks so good on Caitlin Hunter's original version is that she uses this sort of lofted yarn that is going to puff up and sort of take up more space. And she actually does mention this in the pattern. I honestly just skipped over it, not really thinking it would be that big of a deal, but it was a big deal. I think without the sort of lofted yarn that she suggests, the sort of strands of yarn going across the knitting just look very hard to see. It's not very visible. And so I realized by the time I got halfway through the yoke that this pattern didn't really work with the yarn I had, and so I pulled the entire thing out and restarted a different pattern, which is what I'm working on now. And on top of that, believe it or not, there's been more issues. My other issue that I was dealing with pretty much all of yesterday is that I think I have yarn from different dye lots, which is not really something I've thought about in quite a while because Most of the hand-dyed yarn I've worked with recently has not actually had a dye lot listed, and I haven't really had any issues with different skeins of the yarn looking too different. So similarly with this Dream in Color yarn, it did not have a dye lot listed, it just had the colorway name. And so when it doesn't have a dye lot listed, I sort of assume that yarn being in different dye lots is not going to make a huge difference, which I think was an incorrect assumption because I have 6 skeins of this yarn. I basically have what I believe is 3 different dye lots, and that was an issue because I was not sort of alternating my skeins the way that it is suggested to do for hand-dyed yarn. I just wanted to switch from one skein to the next. So I ended up knitting a few inches of the body and then frogging it a couple of times because I realized that the color was completely off. What I've gotten to now basically is that the first 2 skeins I'm working with at this point look like they are in the same dye lot. They look pretty similar. There is like a slight line you can see when I switch from one skein to the next, but it's right at the edge of the yoke, and honestly it's the best I'm gonna get at this point, I think. And so the remaining 4 balls of yarn are in different dye lots, and I'm going to have to try and sort of like alternate and fade those in so it doesn't look too crazy. Anyways, so this project is going pretty well. I've had some setbacks. As I mentioned, I sort of dropped everything else to work on this, so this is going to be what I'm mainly focusing on for the next like month or so. I do have a couple of other projects to give updates on, so if any of you guys watched my yarn no buy video, I said that I didn't want to have too many whips in that video, and I am already back to having 3 whips, which I'm not unhappy with. I think the reason it was so stressful for me in that video where I was talking about feeling overwhelmed by my whips was that I felt like I was in a tough place with all my whips and sort of avoiding all of them. And at this point, I feel like I'm not avoiding any of my whips, it's just that I have ones that I'm focusing on more than the others. But yeah, anyways, I'm back to 3 whips at this point. So first I wanted to give an update on my second groovy tank. I am getting really close to being done with this one. Like I said, I sort of dropped my other projects to work on the ayami sweater for my mom. So unfortunately I stopped working on this for a bit, but honestly I think with maybe like a few days of effort on this tank top, I will be done with it. I think it's going to look sort of misleadingly long how long it took me to make this tank top. I think if I just put like 2 or 3 more days of effort into it, I could be done. So as you can see, I'm done with this sort of bust detailing. At this point I'm just knitting a little bit higher, and then pretty soon I'll be able to split for the neckline as well as bind off for the armpits. So this is an exciting place, and I'm really excited to get back to this once I finish the sweater for my mom. And I have one other whip. I think I'm going to have to pull this one out and redo, but I started on some ruffly socks. I talked about this in my things I want to knit in the fall and winter video, and I talked about it as sort of more of a spring project because honestly I don't see myself wearing these too often in the winter, especially now that I'm in a more wintry spot. These are more of just like a spring cute little warm weather wear because I want to wear them with my loafers and maybe with like a skirt or something. So it's not going to be something that I'll get the most use out of in the winter. To just give a little backstory of this one, this is made using some yarn that Hobby sent me. It's just like a very basic white sock yarn, and I really wanted to get some basic white sock yarn because I've been wanting to make these basic ruffled socks for quite a while. The pattern is Midsummer Dancer Socks, which I thought was very fitting considering my channel name / Instagram username. The problem with this, and the reason that I'm probably going to frog it, is that it's actually way too wide on my leg. This is using around 60 stitches all the way around, and my thought is that maybe I will bump that down to 50 stitches. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and frog this one and probably start working on this again later sometime next year. So this is technically a whip, but I think within the next few days I'm just gonna go ahead and frog it. One subject I like to try and talk about on my podcast is sort of the media that I've been consuming recently. So recently I haven't been watching too much TV. I've been watching Supernatural for quite a while, as you guys probably know, but I've been watching it with one of my friends and he has been not watching very much. Man, if you're watching this, you need to catch up. But so I've kind of been waiting on him to continue watching the series. So my friend lives in Virginia and we're trying to sort of time it so that when I'm home in Virginia for Christmas, we'll be able to watch the actual finale of the show together, which is gonna be so exciting. I've been watching this show for around a year now because I started last year when I was visiting home. So it's been an entire year of my life. I've knit so many things while watching it and I'm like a little bit nostalgic about finishing it. And I have been watching a lot of movies. I watched Glass Onion, which is the new Knives Out movie. I don't want to give too much away in terms of what happens in the movie or anything, but I will say I loved it. I did like the first Knives Out movie better. I just feel like it was such a classic story, so well done, and it was so hard to follow up on it. And I think that like pretty much any second movie, I would have not liked it quite as much as the first one. But I did enjoy this movie as well. It was really good, and I would definitely recommend it if you liked the first Knives Out movie. Aside from that, I've also just been watching some random movies on Netflix. I recently watched How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, which I've never watched before. It was cute. In terms of reading, in my last podcast episode, I believe I talked about how I was reading Percy Jackson, and now I am reading the sequel series to Percy Jackson, which is The Heroes of Olympus. It's kind of crazy, I never read this one in my childhood. I think I read the first book, but I never finished the series. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the series. I think it's a good continuation of the Percy Jackson series, and it also adds in some more characters, which I love. I am not sure where it's going. I don't know how it ends. I'm sure it'll end on like a good note. But I have 2 more books in the series, and I'm really excited to get through them. I also have been reading The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, which I'm really enjoying. I think I've been struggling a little bit to focus on reading sort of like longer books. So The Way of Kings is like 1,200 pages. Although the pages are pretty tiny, it is still a pretty long book. And I think I've been struggling to focus on it a little bit because it switches around point of views a lot, which is also the case with The Heroes of Olympus, by the way. But it switches around point of views a lot, and I feel like it will sort of introduce new characters every time I've just gotten used to and gotten invested in the story of the current character that is narrating. So I've been struggling to sort of keep my momentum on that book, but I am really enjoying it. I really like fantasy, and I'm trying to read more sort of adult fantasy as opposed to just like YA fantasy. Oh, one more thing I wanted to talk about in terms of media is my Spotify Wrapped. So I'm sure you guys all know what Spotify Wrapped is. It's literally all over social media the day that it is released. I'm just going to like put up some screenshots for my Spotify Wrapped on the screen, and I would love to hear your guys' Spotify Wrapped if it was like anywhere near mine, or who your top artist was and what your top song was. I would love to hear that. I am going to just block out Rex Orange County from each of these lists because he sexually assaulted someone, and so I no longer support him or listen to him. But I did listen to him at the beginning of the year, so he's still on my Spotify Wrapped, and I'm just going to like block him out and not include him. But aside from that, obviously I listened to a lot of Taylor Swift. I was in the top 0.5%, which is nothing crazy. I saw a lot of people who had like hundreds of thousands of minutes to listen to her, and I was not anywhere near that, but I am a big Taylor Swift fan, as you guys know, so I had to be like somewhere in the top percent. Aside from that, my top song was Superstition by Stevie Wonder, which was my hyper fixation this year, so I'm not that surprised that it's my top song, although I kind of expected a Taylor Swift song to overtake it. Yeah, and I didn't have a crazy amount of minutes listened this year. In the past when I've had Spotify Wrapped, there have been times when I've had like 50,000 minutes listened, and what I realized is that I think as like a full-time adult, I just am not listening to music quite as often because there's less sort of downtime in my day where I would be putting on music. For example, when I was a student, I would be like walking to class all the time, and I would always be putting on music in those sort of like 20-minute breaks between classes. And that's just like not the case as an adult. I don't really listen to music while I'm working because it makes me not able to focus too well. So it's really just like morning or in the car, occasionally at night, but I'm usually like doing other things at night, like watching TV or reading a book. So there's just not as many times nowadays that I put on music, and so I think that's why my minutes are so much lower than it has been in previous years. Okay, I think that's basically it. I've given updates on all my whips. I don't have any finished objects, so nothing to share there yet. And then I've sort of shared different media I've been listening to and reading and all that stuff. If you're still watching at this point, I would really appreciate if you gave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed it. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.